In the deep, cold fjords of the north, where mist curls low over the water and mountains rise like ancient sentinels, the shipwrights began their work at first light. The rhythm of their days was measured by the tides and the seasons. Before the sun touched the peaks, they were already in motion, sharpening axes, examining timbers laid out upon the frozen ground, and tracing the curves that would one day meet the sea. The smell of resin and pine filled the air. Chips of oak scattered beneath their boots, softening the sound of footsteps. The work was patient and precise, each plank carved to fit another by feel, not by sight alone. The master shipwright would run his hands along the grain of the wood, listening for resistance. Every tree they felled had to be chosen with care. In the forests above the fjord, the oaks grew strong but twisted by wind. It was in that twisting that they found strength. Men would say the trees remembered storms, and that made them worthy of the sea. They worked beside the water, in shipyards darkened by soot and smoke. The hammering was slow, deliberate, like a heartbeat. The pitchpots bubbled gently over small fires, the scent thick and tarry. When the wind shifted, the waves carried the smell out to the fishing boats offshore, mingling with salt and seaweed. Between strokes, the men paused to stretch their hands, to wipe the sawdust from their brows, to watch the sunlight move across the fjord. These shipwrights knew every curve of a vessel as one might know a familiar face. The keel, laid first, was a spine. The ribs rose from it in graceful arcs, the hull swelling outward like a living form. They measured by instinct, by thumb, by string, by memory. There were no written plans, only inherited knowledge, passed from father to son, from master to apprentice. Some of them spoke softly as they worked, murmuring old blessings to keep the wood from splitting. The sea was a temperamental god, and the ship a kind of offering. When the final iron nails were driven in, and the dragon's head was fastened to the prow, the ship stood gleaming in the morning sun. Its curved timbers caught the light like polished bone. Villagers gathered to watch the launching. There were prayers, songs, and offerings cast into the waves. Then with creaking ropes and the shouts of men, great vessels slid into the water, its first touch of the element it was born for. The shipwrights stood back in silence. They did not shout or cheer. They watched the hull steady itself upon the water, listened as it found its balance. In that moment, their craft was complete. The ship no longer belonged to them, but to the men who would sail it to the sea itself. Years later, some of these ships would never return. They would vanish beyond the horizon, swallowed by storms or distant wars. But the builders, in their quiet villages, continued their work. The next winter would bring new orders, new keels, new songs. The rhythm of the hammering never truly stopped. Centuries passed. The fjords changed. The sea grew quieter. The shipyards were buried in grass and earth. But beneath the soil, the memory of those days endured. Archaeologists, digging through layers of time, would one day uncover the shapes of ships long gone, their timbers darkened by age, their tools still resting nearby. In the silence of those burial mounds, the craft still spoke. The curves of the hulls still whispered of hands that had known the language of wood and water. It is a quiet mystery how something so temporary as human labor could create something so enduring. The wood that once floated on oceans now lies beneath the ground, preserved by the same cold air that once carried the sound of hammering. Even the dragonheads, once fierce and proud, seem at peace in the soil. There is a contrast, too, that lingers across time. The calm reflection of the fjord where each vessel was born, against the wild expanse of the sea where it met its fate. The builders worked in silence, surrounded by the echo of gulls, while far away, warriors and merchants rode their creations into chaos and legend. The shipwrights built not for glory, but for endurance, to make something that could hold against the weight of waves. Their world was one of patience. The fjord mirrored their stillness. The mountains kept their secrets. When the day's work ended, the men sat by small fires, repairing tools and warming their hands. The smell of smoke clung to their wool. Somewhere out beyond the mouth of the fjord, another ship's sail might be visible, a pale shape against the dark sea, returning or leaving, carrying their handiwork into the unknown. In the rhythm of their hammers, in the slow bending of timber and the hum of wind through the valley, there was a deep, steady peace. The shipwrights of the Viking fjords shaped more than wood. They shaped endurance itself, the quiet resilience of hands that worked in harmony with nature, of men who understood that strength and grace could be carved from the same grain. And when you stand beside the water now, where the air still tastes faintly of salt and pine, you can almost hear it, the soft ring of metal on wood, the sigh of the tide against the shore, and the ghostly breath of wind that once filled their sails.